Good evening. It's I don't know, fairly late here in this Northeast, and I just spent probably about 35 minutes reading some poetry that I just discovered, much to my horror, did not go live. But anyway, I'm going to read some more, you know? Anyway, this will be a little, maybe, hopefully a gift to you. I'm going to start with one of my flagship poems that's called Old School Germantown, which is a neighborhood that I grew up in Philadelphia, founded by Quakers. Actually, completely settled separately from the rest of Philadelphia. And it has kind of a, in those days, it had sort of a African-American bohemian vibe, if I could, in other words, like in the park across the street, there was Cleveland Park. Every weekend, a bunch of drummers would play, and some of the jazz guys, like the late, great Bayard Lancaster, would come by. Everybody in my neighborhood played some kind of instrument. I played guitar and piano. Henry Burney lived up the street, played a mean guitar. Lawrence played piano, and his brother Charles. We all played something. That was just what you did as a young, lower middle class kid. But anyway, this is called Old School Germantown, and hopefully this is recording, because I don't know how many times I can do this tonight, all right? Back in the day, when the homies played congas in the small park across the street where I grew up, and gangs roamed free, named for neighborhoods like Haynes Street, supposedly the toughest street in my lower middle class hood. Back in the day, where the homies played great music, drums, saxes, whatever, in homes, on porches, in parks. Wasn't any kid on my block that didn't play some kind of instrument. Of course, I was the only kid on my block who also dug the folk music that both white dudes and now old sons of sharecroppers shared through the radio. Static from Boston, WBZ. Several years later, auditioning my tunes at some folk club clear across the race divide. Some white dudes say, puzzled eyebrows raised, well, what clubs do you play? Meaning, this is white music, brother, and who would employ you? Didn't know that a young man of your complexion could do it this way. He probably thought, hey, what I hear is all good, but the color of the singer, it's just, well, it's just wrong. Years later, from Tangier to Osaka, from Rio to Sion, I learned that the music that came from my Germantown, Philadelphia hood was played in places, hovels, and palaces all over the world, from Osaka to Timbuktu. Great black music, beautiful more than anything, soul, jazz, hip-hop, hell, I don't know, maybe even some classical, but mostly pure and not literal, embellished by experience gained in life and on streets. Your people got music, my college roommates say. Later, Martina Navratilova say, after some tournament, I envy you blacks. You got the boogie, you got the beat. She'd tell me this back in my newspaper days. Back in the day, crooked streets of Germantown, my small lower middle class hood that way before its time settled into its own groove by the experience of Quakers who fled the old world during the days that formed America way, way back in the day. Cool, too cool for School Germantown, where unlike anywhere else it was okay, dare I say, to be white, to be black and date white. As my homie once say, Germantown high, hey, nobody say nothing if you go out with a white girl. It's just not such a big deal. Years later, I learned to appreciate the funky roots that gave birth to the mixed blood that flows through my Afro-Eurasian veins. Years later, here in my small town hood, my 11-year-old son wears dreadlocks and hears hip-hop. Music not so different, really, from the sounds of the streets I walk through way back in the day. Such a rich feeling now, to grow old and still weave absolutely new school rhythms, textures and forms, still informed by twists and turns of memory, some few lessons learned way back in the day. All right. Let me see here. What can I share with you? Boy, you'd better be recording, because I can't do this again. Well, I could actually, but that would be self-indulgent, you know what I'm saying? Not that I've never been self-indulgent. In fact, I want you to make a case that this whole talking into the microphone at whatever time at night is self-indulgent, but I'm not going to make that case. I'm just having a little fun. And I'm trying to find a poem that I want to read. And I'm not, it's taken me a little while. I hope you'll bear with me. Let's see. Ah, okay. Now, some of you may know a woman named Pema Chodron. She's a Buddhist nun. She's very famous in certain circles. You can find her, lots of her books and recordings are on Sounds True. Find on the internet. Anyway, this is a poem about her, and it's called That Nun Saved Me. She is a Buddhist nun. That nun saved me, the Buddhist one, originally from New York, the one with the hair cropped down all skinhead-like, and that voice, smooth and girlish, 70 years of wear, she saved me. That nun saved me. It was even before the gong sounded boom, sudden and clear, from the audio tape in the cheap cassette player sitting next to me in my bath. Something she said just saved me. That nun saved me. And later, grounded down in cool, cold water, clear, austere clarity, I Googled her down, curious how she came to serve me, and all the fucked up people just like me. I Googled her down, curiosity. And even while surfing, I felt her slap me down Zen Buddhist-like from my tabloid slumber. Slap me down just as I reached the part where she met the high priest guy. The monk that saved her guy. The monk that gave me the save me key. I wanted to know about the save me key. As she slapped me down metaphorically, she reminded me that she'd already given me the save me key. The key, she explained, was right there here in front of me. Couldn't be more in front of me. Breathing now. What's in front of me? The soot, dirt, grime, grease, and pain of what's in front of me. Owning the pain that's inside of me. And not just the pain that's in front of me, but the pain from the fucked up people just like me. From all the fucked up people just like me. And then breathing out the gentle healing rain, the pouring down sweet honey rain, the rain that heals all the parts of me, the rain that heals all the fucked up people just like me, that heals all the fucked up people just like me. She saved me, that none saved me. All right, I'm going to read this one. On the page, I just posted something about my first teacher named Andrew Habakkuk, whom I've lost track of. I don't know if he's still on the planet right now, but I wrote about Andrew extensively in my book, Notes of New Age, Notes for a New Age, which you can find on Amazon. I believe there's one copy left at the moment. I may update it, I may not. Andrew was my first teacher. I met him in a McDonald's on Philadelphia. I was writing an article about Philadelphia jazz, and I was very excited to do this. I didn't have a car, and I remembered that I just did an interview, and I needed to get something to eat. Stopped at McDonald's, and back in those days, when I went to McDonald's, I was macrobiotic, which meant I was involved in rice and vegetables and miso soup, or as my old friend Nolu once called it, the yin and the yang and the bim and the bam. Yin and the yang and the bim and the bam. Anyway, so it was kind of kosher if you went to McDonald's to get a fish fillet sandwich and some water with some little salt on there. We didn't do like the Big Mac or nothing like that. But anyway, I went into McDonald's. I'm kind of rushing because I got to go to West Philadelphia to do another interview. I looked over, there's this young black man, or a little bit older than me. He goes, greetings. I said, hi. Join me? And I joined him, and the next day I went to visit him in his apartment. And he said something to the nature of, I greet you as one who is enlightened. And, nothing he did ever proved him wrong. I could talk about Andrew for a long time. Anyway, I'm just going to read this poem. I will say one thing. I have this thing that I say that annoys my wife no end. Whenever it's raining or something, the weather is bad, I say something I got from Andrew, because one day it was fierce snowstorm, wind is blowing, no cars on the street, we're walking in the center street, we have to fight just to walk because it's so it's so windy. And it's snowing, the wind is blowing. Andrew just goes, it's nice out. I kind of looked at him like he was crazy. And he goes, it's always nice out. That's how I feel. I don't complain about weather. Anyway, I wrote this poem for him, and I wrote a longer piece that's in my book, Notes for a New Age. And it's called Chameleon. It was Andrew who taught me the wisdom of the chameleon ways. Why it was better to blend in than stick out. No fixed views, background neutral, different color for every occasion. Set opinions he compared to ethereal prisons, places where captives of reason stood convicted, convinced they were free. Honor instead, Drew said, the example of the chameleon. More will know of you than know you. See in themselves colors you've allowed in their situation to emerge. Neither politics nor religion. No fixed eyes, but mirrors. Opinions others have of you, not about you. Statements about themselves. Another teacher is a guy you can still find. He's the head of something called Inner Light Ministries, ilm.org, I believe. And Jim's a very important figure in my life. Once I was miserable, and I decided to go on a retreat. And I wanted to go where no one knew me. And I had I guess you call it a reading or a session with Jim, and I knew he was cool. And so anyway, I went to Indiana, of all places. Very flat in Indiana. A woman that picked me up, she says, yeah, it's flat, but you can see little variations as you drive. And that's probably true. There's variety everywhere, right? Even in what looks like sameness. In any event, I went to this retreat, and it was okay. It's mostly okay that was Jim there. I was still kind of miserable. But I kind of had this bond with this woman. Like myself, she was involved in what's called the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness, MSIA.org. And there were people there that were from, I think most people were connected to some spiritual group or other. Anyway, we bonded around that. We knew some people. And when I got back to my town, I believe it was New Hope or Lambertville. I think it was New Hope, PA. I think it was a letter. Was that before email? I don't remember. I got some communication from her. And when I went to this retreat, I'd read the billing, the poster, and there was one guy that was supposed to be there. I didn't think anything of it because he never showed up. So anyway, this woman wrote me, and she said, I don't know too much about what you're into, but I know that you're a writer. And you remember that guy that didn't show up at the retreat? Well, he was Jim's writer, and Jim needs a writer. Why don't you contact him? And I did. Even though I had a phone session scheduled for Jim, I just put some clips together, I sent it down to Jim. I had a session scheduled for him. I figured maybe Jim and I will talk about it then. He calls me on the phone, right? And he goes, I read your stuff. It's quite interesting. Well, thank you, Jim. What should we do about this? And I said, I don't know. What would you suggest? Why don't you come down to Austin? Jim flew me down to Austin. He was a wonderful host. We visited things like we had a different ethnic cuisine restaurant every night. We went to the LBJ Museum down there in Austin. Austin is a fabulous town. I haven't been there since, but anyway, Jim and I, Jim was very important to me because as this woman that introduced me to him told me later, she said, I didn't introduce you to Jim for your sake, but for him, because I think that he's lonely, because people just see him as this sort of figure, whereas you don't know it yet, but you're really like Jim on the inside. And it's really true. I won't say too much about it now. But anyway, I'll read this poem about Jim. I was his ghostwriter for a while, and it was a wonderful experience. This is called Austin Jim. It was Austin Jim who mirrored me back, simplified. Shifted the light somewhere in there, place I sensed but didn't fully explore. Familiar landscape, old guy knew well. I still get lost walking through that neighborhood. Tunnels and traps at one end. Other bright lights fake, shimmering like jewels. Fool's gold. Many deviated, strayed, lost their way. If I'm steady, I'll make it. Stay still and listen. Voice of inner senses. Blind eyes that see, bat's way of navigating, seeking well-worn path. Needed a guide who'd been there. Tell me it's this way or that. Here's what you'll find when you get there. Trainer's wheels teacher gives before you walk the road alone. Being weak, I needed examples, exemplars, reliable maps, fine-tuning many Austin gems to tell me, remind me in many ways over. Trust in these abstractions, the high mysticism in which you live. All right. I think I got just maybe I'll read two more. This one is called Code, and it's a little bit self-explanatory. It echoes my belief that everything we see, every manifestation, there's something behind it. It's part of a code. Part of growth is learning to read the code, and one can get somewhat proficient at it, but it's always deeper than what you see, even if you have some wisdom. Anyway, this is called Code. Even the infidel, non-believer, his, her way believes say, a tree is not just a tree, not just a mixture of wood and soil and leaves and insects, so much more to it than that. Beyond the tree's surface breathes history, circumstance, reason, non-believers say. For example, ginkgo tree chosen, conceived by planner, planted by landscape-wise immigrants from Oaxaca region of Mexico. Balance for tall metal and glass, office building cocoon of texture in midst of non-organic world. But even that insufficient explanation, non-believers say. Tree part of mysterious, complex ecosystem. Gives life, depends on elements, other living things for life. Systems inside of systems, living things inside of living things. Leaves, flowers, birds, insects, soil, wood, flowers, carbon, water, shade. So many more things than that. Tree, not just a tree. So many more things than that. In his, her way, infidel, non-believer believes. Surface, all things is code, which broken reveals another code, which broken reveals another code, endlessly, ultimately unbreakable code, esoteric design, system inside systems, living things inside living things. This will be the last one I'm going to read tonight. Getting a little older now. Look in the mirror. I'm not 19. I'm not 29. I'm not 39. All right? This one is, and I spend a lot of time with my 92-year-old mother, which reminds me that my mortality, that all things come to an end. And as one person once said to me, he said, you know, there's more years behind me that are in front of me. Of course, that's a relative thing, if you believe in many existences, as I do. I'm always moving towards something. And I'm privileged to, I'm seeing a dream without an end. Anyway, this is called 2-3 Steps Ahead. Good to think, maybe 2-3 steps ahead. Now at the end of the mating season, young men lean and confident and teasing, lay down near the girls in the grass in their summer clothes, on the field where the daisies push up and the corn leans tall. Deer play on the meadow adjacent to the highway, all living things in their prime before the dawn of the dying season. Some places on this earth true, the florid season seems to last forever. Fruit seems to stay lush and ready. Warm winds seldom change direction. All things conspire to mask the falling and the turning and the ending. And in other places true, the sun burns day after day after day and brings no hint of the collapse of the light. And the drop of the veil which holds back the sun, revealing the face of the night and the brooding moon. Follow the way of the old warrior tree. Though you felt the same rhythms maybe 100 times, hear the call maybe 2-3 steps ahead, like all things moving towards ultimate goals. Be like the old tree ready when the time is up. When the winds change and cool down the sky, and the birds take their singing south, and the deer lay down in search of sleep. Warrior Tree knew when his time was up. Though he'd felt the same rhythms maybe 1,000 times, willed his leaves to color and fall, slipped easily into the arms of the dying season. So that's it, my friends. I hope you enjoyed my little spontaneous reading, and I hope you'll reach out. Always like to hear from folks. I don't always like to hear from folks, but I'm an extrovert. Hopefully, I can enhance you and you can enhance me. Angelo out. Where's that publish button, finish button? Peace out.